Lesson 26 is range of motion. So, is it wrong for you to contract your pelvic floor muscles if you have overactive pelvic floor muscles? And my answer is no, but we want to do it intentionally and we want to do it the right way. There is a lot of controversy out there. You'll hear 500 million people saying Kegels are bad if you have overactive pelvic floor muscles. And I'm not opposing that because a lot of times people are just given a sheet of exercises regardless of what they have going on, and they may have pelvic pain. Here's a sheet of Kegels to go do. Well, that person hasn't been evaluated. Their pelvic floor muscles haven't been evaluated. Are they overactive? Are they weak? You know, what's going on with them? And so I think that a generic exercise prescription is a bad idea for any area of the body, much less the pelvic floor and these specialized muscles. But I also think that there's a lot of fear that's been created about our bodies and like, oh, if I squeeze my pelvic floor muscles, I'm doing a wrong thing. I'm going to make my overactive pelvic floor muscles worse. Well, you guys, your pelvic floor muscles are part of your core. They're working with pretty much everything that you're doing. When you're walking around, when you're talking, when you're lifting, when you're exercising, whatever you're actively doing, there's going to be some pelvic floor muscle engagement that's happening. So there's no way that you can just turn off your pelvic floor muscles in your whole life and not have them work. Okay, so that's number one. So take the fear out of it because your pelvic floor muscles are already working. Let's be intentional about what we're doing. Okay, number two, what is the definition of a Kegel? So a Kegel is like a quick pelvic floor contraction. You know, is that in itself a bad thing to do? Like, even if you have pain, let's say you had pain in your arm, is it bad for you to lift your arm up because you had pain? You know, doing it over and over and over and over and trying to hold it in this position all day, yeah, that's bad. We don't want to do that with any muscle group in our body. But oh, I just feel like there's been so much fear created about doing a Kegel or doing a quick contraction if you have overactive pelvic floor muscles. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that most of the time, from everything that I have seen and every person that I've worked with, if those muscles are overactive, the majority of the time they are weak. They're weak muscles and they're kind of stuck in this tight, stiff position. And so we need to move them. We need to get that excursion. We need to get the blood flow. And I'm in a minute, I have a slide that goes over, you know, a lot of great benefits of range of motion, moving that muscle. But before I did that, I wanted to connect with you here and tell you, if you have overactive pelvic floor muscles, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of things we can do, and don't be afraid to squeeze. We also want to release, and we want to have a purpose behind why we're squeezing, and we want to have a plan, right? Not just a generic sheet of exercises that everyone gets, but don't be afraid of your body because your pelvic floor muscles are already squeezing and working with what you're doing. And doing a squeeze is very, very unlikely to cause you any harm. And it's, in fact, likely to benefit you. And so check this out. Here is a reminder of what the pelvic floor muscles do. So they need to correctly contract and they need to completely let go. We need that full excursion. We need them to let go. We need them to be able to squeeze and be able to go to, you know, be able to do both motions, basically squeezing the anus, squeezing the vagina, squeezing the urethra, and then also letting go. Also, remember, we've talked some about having a mixture. So you could have overactive pelvic floor muscles here around the anus, but underactive pelvic floor muscles up here. So just because you have some overactivity in some area of the muscles doesn't mean that every single pelvic floor muscle is overactive. And that's another advantage of this self-check that you're doing. So you checked the superficial front layer, you check the superficial back layer, you check the deep front layer, you check the deep back layer. And the advantage of working with a pelvic floor physical therapist is that they can dive even deeper into identifying specific muscular restrictions within the pelvic floor muscle group. I kind of broke it down into 4 quadrants for you, but somebody that's skilled and trained can even dive deeper to help identify what's going on. Now we have a reminder of what the muscles should do, and we want them to squeeze, we want them to release, we want them to squeeze, we want them to release. And through all the activities that we've been doing this month, I am focusing on both. I'm focusing on squeezing and we're focusing on releasing, squeezing and releasing. Even during our strengthening exercise, I'd say at least 30, if not 50% of the time that we're strengthening, we actually have a rest cycle in there. And in that rest cycle, you're working on lengthening, you're working on relaxing, you're letting go. Okay, so some of the benefits of range of motion, and maybe I should actually clarify this. What is range of motion? It's harder with the pelvic floor muscles. It's easier with the bicep. So range of motion is basically where you go through that whole range and you're moving. So it seems really simple, but like for the bicep, we want it to fully extend and then we want it to fully flex. Okay, so that's the elbow, full extension, full flexion. And the bicep is helping to make that happen. Full extension, full flexion. If the bicep, let's say, could only go here, then that would be limited and it couldn't go any further, right? That would be limited extension. Okay, but let's say it could go all the way here, but it could only go here and it couldn't go all the way here, then that would be limited flexion. So there's, and as a physical therapist, we actually measure these things and, you know, there's a lot that goes into it, but that's an overall of what range of motion is. And so when we apply that concept to range of motion with the pelvic floor, we're squeezing, pulling up and in, and we're releasing, relaxing. And so we want that full range, squeezing well, a strong, hard contraction, and then relax all the way. And then here are some of the benefits of range of motion. So improved blood flow and circulation, improved muscle excursion, improved muscle strength, enhanced function of the muscle, reduced pain, which is a lot of times opposite from what people think, reduced stiffness, and decreased injury potential. So let's check out that range of motion again. When we're looking at the pelvic floor, this is what we're looking at, range of motion. Correctly contract, completely let go, and then of course, the coordination element is doing it at the right time, doing the right thing at the right time. Now, I do want to say this as well, and I've given you this instruction as we've been going along, but I don't want you to have pain when you're squeezing. So if you have pain, whether it's because you have overactive pelvic floor muscles or not, if you have pain when you're squeezing, I don't want you to squeeze that way. I want you, again, not medical advice, but if you were my patient, I would have you do a submaximal contraction. So instead of doing, like when we're squeezing, generally we want a strong, a maximum voluntary contraction. We're squeezing that bicep, right? But if that hurts, then let's back off. You could still do the full motion maybe, but it's not a maximum contraction. Maybe it's a sub-maximal contraction. So a 30% effort level or a 50% effort level. So you're still doing it, it's just not causing pain. Or if you're not even able to do that, doing less motion with less intensity. So instead of trying to squeeze that anus 100%, squeeze the anus 50%, and it's a softer squeeze. So those are some of the ideas that I would have to modify. And then also the length, how long, like a lot of the exercises that we're doing, we're holding 8 to 10 seconds. So if you can do 3 seconds without pain, we'll work within your pain-free range and then gradually build into the range as you're able to, okay? And then the same thing would go with repetitions. Let's say you're able to do 3 seconds, and you can do 5 repetitions. But then when you get to the 6th, it starts hurting. Well, I wouldn't do the 6th. I would either stop at 5, or I would give yourself a longer rest break. So maybe if you did 5, skip rep 6, add 7, skip rep 8, add 9. You know, there's a lot of different variations and things that you can do. So it's not all or nothing. I don't want you to be afraid of your body, and I don't want you to be afraid of squeezing your pelvic floor muscles correctly, even if you have overactive pelvic floor muscles. There's this one topic I think could be a whole day webinar. So I hope that this gives you a helpful overview. I'd love to hear your comments below. I know we have some pelvic PTs in this challenge too, so I want to hear from you. And you don't have to be a pelvic PT to drop something, but I'd love your feedback. And we are now moving on to biofeedback.